Man, I'm bored. I got this I don't know if you can see it, but I got this $1 million bill with me. I kind of feel the urge to just blow all of it just in one go. But I don't really know what to use it for. Actually, I got an idea. I'm about to show you the absolutely real, no bullshit, totally real, actual factual, rarest, and most expensive video games of all time. And I own all of them! Video games! Yeah, I think we're done here. Video games are one pricey form of entertainment. Right now, most games go for $60 to $70, but back when games were still cartridges, they were $60 to $70, some even more, but due to inflation, $70 then is way pricier now. But sometimes there are games that either don't sell well, or don't have as much copies produced, or simply just go up in value over time and are deemed the rarest games of all time. And since I own all of them, once again, no bullshit, I'm gonna show you all of them. Hey. Of course, we're gonna start with the one, the only, Nintendo! And we're gonna do that in chronological order, which means we're starting with the NES. And what better way to start with than Nintendo World Championship? If you don't know, the Nintendo World Championship is an event set up by Nintendo where players compete in multiple games. In 1990, there was a competition between players where they played Super Mario Bros., Rad Racer, and Tetris. 90 gray cartridges were given to the 90 finalists, but there are 26 gold cartridges that were only available through a Nintendo Power Contest. Good thing I have it, so I can play! What you are looking at here is the crown jewel for the NES. Or at least one of them. Alright, Super Mario Bros. So what's going on here is that you have a total of 6 minutes and 21 seconds to play all 3 games, and when you're playing Super Mario Bros, you have to collect 50 coins as quickly as possible. I can do that in my sleep. Okay, time for Rad Racer. This time you have to finish the first race as quickly as possible. Did it. Finally, the game moves on to Tetris, and with the remaining time you have to get the highest score in Tetris Type A. Beat it. And that's Nintendo World Championship. Obviously, it was meant more for like competition's sake, so playing it at home is a little more odd, but it's a neat little piece of gaming history, you know what I mean? But that's not the only crown jewel of the NES, as I take you over to stadium events. What happened here was Bandai published stadium events, but it then got pulled from store shelves, and Nintendo re-released it as World Class Track Meet, which is a much more common game, often seeing it bundled with Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt. Moving on to the SNES, that console's rarest games were also competition games. Games like Super Nintendo Campus Challenge and PowerFest 94. Starting with Campus Challenge, this was similar to Nintendo World Championship as it was a contest of 3 games, but this time, this contest toured many college campuses, hence the name, and had situational challenges from Super Mario World, F-Zero, and Pilot Wings respectively. Done, done, done. Man, that was easy. Also, you wanna know how many copies of this game exist? 3. Yeah, not 300, not 3,000, not 30, not 7, 3. Moving on to PowerFest 94, there are only 2 surviving copies of this one. Yeah, that's right. That's less than 3. And this one is also similar, as Nintendo and retailers would set up a competition outside. The competition, similar to Nintendo World Championship, was 6-minute trials for 3 SNES games, this time being Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, Super Mario Kart, and everyone's favorite SNES game, Ken Griffey Jr. Presents Major League Baseball. I mean, that alone makes it worth it. Moving on to the Game Boy, the rarest game for that is Amazing Tater. But how amazing is it? We're here to find that out. Well, fuck yeah it is! Money pony up $700 fucking for that one! Next up, Want to know a joke? The Virtual Boy. I know, isn't it funny?
Now, to be honest, the Virtual Boy in general sold pretty bad, which means all the games on it also sold pretty bad. But according to price charting, Jack Bros is actually more expensive than an actual Virtual Boy, but not expensive enough to avoid my $1 million bill.
Now moving on to the Nintendo 64, the rarest game on there without question is Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut.
Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut is an updated and kind of definitive edition of Clay Fighter 63 1/3, because I guess that game just wasn't a Nintendo 64 game enough. The reason it's so rare is because it was an exclusive to Blockbuster. That'll do it.
Next up is the Game Boy Color. The rarest game on there is... it's Shantae. We all know Shantae now as like an indie game icon, but back then, Shantae was like this new game that came out way after the Game Boy Advance did. So, kind of flew under the radar, I guess. Speaking of which, next up is the Game Boy Advance. And the rarest game on there is a game called Ninja 5-0, which was a game made by Konami before they were shit. Pretty cool.
A gang is robbing a bank on the main street. Rush onto the scene.
Will do.
And after that pretty cool intro, what do I think of the rarest game for the Game Boy Advance? It's fine. Next.
Alright, next up is the GameCube, and the rarest game on the GameCube is a game called Pokemon Box.
Pokemon Box. Let's go. Okay, so we have the option between going to Pokemon Box and go to Adventure.
Well, I am playing Pokemon Box, so let's go to Pokemon Box.
Please connect the Nintendo GameCube Game Boy Advance cable between the controller socket 2 and your Game Boy Advance system.
Alright.
That was weird, but let's go to Adventure. Please connect the Nintendo... Alright,
so as it turns out, Pokemon Box isn't really a game, like, at all. It's actually an application that lets you save Pokemon in Ruby and Sapphire on your GameCube. And it got a physical release. This was before, like, little applications were a thing. Next up is the DS. And the rarest game on the DS is none other than... Twilight Princess.
Preview trailer? Let's play.
Take it!
So as you probably figured out, this isn't Zelda Twilight Princess for the DS necessarily, but it's a trailer for it on a DS cartridge. Pretty much Nintendo made a limited amount of DS cartridges for journalists to see a trailer for an upcoming game for the Wii and GameCube on the DS.
But DPX, this isn't a game. Fine. The rarest game on the DS is like Shepherd's Crossing 2 or some shit. You happy? Next up is the Wii. And the two rarest games I want to say on the Wii, or at least the most valuable, are Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn and Metroid Prime Trilogy.
In the case of Radiant Dawn, that one went up in value because I guess that's just a thing with RPGs. And as for Metroid Prime Trilogy, I guess it also went up in value. Just because. Moving on.
Next up is the 3DS, and the rarest game for the 3DS, the crown jewel of that system. Are you ready for this? Are you sitting? Because you need to be sitting for this. Alright? Barbie Groom and Glam Pups. I would assume this one went up in value because no one bought it when it came out. It seems more like shovelware. So I guess it's a shovelware game that became rare. Does that happen? Speaking of nobody buying it, by the way, the Wii U!
A lot of games really went up in value on the Wii U. Games like Twilight Princess HD, Wii Sports Club, Game & Wario, Mario and Sonic at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games, and who can forget Hello Kitty Cruisers? What, you mean to tell me you forgot about this one? But the rarest game for the Wii U, without question, is Devil's Third. This is a game that was going to be published by THQ, but then they went under, so the game was in a bit of limbo. So Nintendo, of all companies, came in and published Devil's Third pretty much out of sympathy because nobody else wanted to. And on top of that, it's a Nintendo game that is rated M, and on top of that, it was on the Wii U.
You probably wanted me to play Devil's Third. No can do. Even if devils are pretty spooky. And last but certainly not least, for Nintendo, we got the Nintendo Switch. And the Switch is still kind of new. I say that as at the time of recording, it's kind of on its way out. But there are certain games on there that, will go up in value in the future. But I want to say the rarest game right now is the Final Fantasy 1-6 collection, or Pixel Remasters, or however you want to call it, whatever it's called.
What can I tell you? It's a pretty neat collection of the first 6 Final Fantasy games. Sort of. You see, Square Enix released a series called the Final Fantasy Pixel Remasters, which were separate remasters of Final Fantasy 1-6, respectively, on mobile. But Square Enix later released all of the remasters in one package on the PS4 and the Switch, but for $75, not $60, not $70, $75, and only available through Square Enix's website.
I managed to get mine from PlayAsia, and I'm pretty happy with this. It's a neat little collection of the first 6 Final Fantasy games, even if, it's quite obvious that they were originally mobile games. But, or at least these versions of the games were originally mobile games, but it's still neat, especially if you're a Final Fantasy fan. And yeah, physical proof that I own this one is physical proof that I own everything else in this video. Nintendo's not the only player with rare games, as Sega's got some goodies too. We're going to start off with the Sega Master System, and the rarest game on there is James Buster Douglas Knockout Boxing. Quite a mouthful.
So this is a boxing game based off of James Buster Douglas. Believe it or not, this is actually better known as a Sega Genesis game, so I guess the Master System version is rarer because it's the lesser known one. I'm going to be honest, the music slaps, and the game is pretty fun. So fun, it's worth nearly $3,000.
Alright, but when I say the rarest Sega games, you don't really care about the Master System. I know some of you do, but you're in the like vocal minority. But you want to hear about the rarest Sega Genesis games. Well, the rarest game on the Genesis is Tetris. No, seriously, Tetris.
So believe it or not, Tetris is the rarest game on the Sega Genesis. However, it was never officially released. You see, at the time, Nintendo had the publishing rights to Tetris, so while there was a Sega Genesis version of the game made, it was never released, at least not officially. It instead became one of those unlicensed Sega Genesis games. So we're gonna play it.
What can I tell you? I am playing the worst version of Tetris.
What's with the backgrounds? What's with the music? This just isn't it, man. So this is the rarest game for the Sega Genesis, but since it wasn't officially released, this probably doesn't count. So I guess others would include Musha, The Punisher, Why Are You Coming Up in 2 episodes in a row, and Paprium, which, by the way, was a Genesis game released in 2020. Just wanted to mention that.
Okay, so that was the Sega Genesis. Let's move on to their handheld, the Game Gear. One rare game on there is the Japan-only Griffin.
Yay, I'm in a video game. I knew I could do it.
Now, Griffin, get the fuck out of here. I'm not talking about you. But from what I'm able to find, the rarest game on the Game Gear is Mega Man. Yeah. Did you guys know that there was a Mega Man game on the Game Gear? I'll save it for another time. Moving on to one of the Sega Genesis add-ons, the Sega CD, perhaps the most coveted prize of that console or add-on is Hideo Kojima's very own Snatcher.
This one, I think, just went up in value because it's one of very few games on a shitty add-on for a console, and nobody bought the shitty add-on. As for the 32X, the rarest game seems to be Spider-Man Web of Fire. Whoop-de-doo. The Sega Saturn, however, this was a console that sold pretty poorly and was short-lived, so the rarest game I could find is perhaps the console's most beloved, Panzer Dragoon Saga. Some other games worth noting are Magic Knight Rayearth, Mega Man 8, and Guardian Heroes.
And lastly, for Sega, the Dreamcast. This suffered from a similar issue as the Saturn, not really selling that well and being discontinued rather quickly.
Many of the rarest Sega Dreamcast games include Gigawing, Gigawing 2, Illbleed, Cannon Spike, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Project Justice, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Techromancer, and Power Stone 2.
And want to know the weird thing about all these games? Every game I just named, like every single one of them, they're all made by Capcom. Like every single one of them. And Illbleed. That one's not made by Capcom. What, did you expect something else? No, it's not made by Capcom! We have come to PlayStation and Xbox. I'm combining them because, look, had I not, PlayStation would have been fine by itself, but Xbox kinda wouldn't be. We're gonna start off with the PS1, and the rarest game on there is this game called Elemental Gearbolt.
And let me tell you, it's a rail shooter, and not a very good one. That's all I really got.
Alright, so that was Elemental Gearbolt for the PS1, but let's move on to the PS2.
There are two rarest games I was able to find for the PlayStation 2. The most popular being a game called Kuon, a survival horror game developed by From Software? Alright, that's pretty interesting. What else is interesting and weird is that while From Software developed this game, they also self-published it, but only in Japan. In fact, Japan, Europe, and the United States each has a different publisher for this game. As for the other game I was able to find, that game was Rule of Rose, another survival horror game. It is spooky season after all. This one though, not developed by From Software, but was developed by Atlus. Atlus, of course, best known for games like Catherine and Shin Megami Tensei, and of course, their best known game, Amazing Tater from earlier. You thought I was going to say Persona, didn't you?
So that was the PS2. How about the PSP? Chronological, remember. Well, the rarest game on the PSP is without question Ys 1 and 2 Chronicles.
Well, it's a neat little remaster of the first two Ys games. Ys is an RPG series that I feel kinda just exists. I don't know. I know it has a lot of games, but I don't really ever hear people talking about them. But then when they get brought up, people are like, yo, I love Ys. I'm like, I don't know. To me, it just sort of exists. But either way, this is a nice remaster of the first two games, and the soundtrack goes hard.
Moving on to the PS3, the rarest game on there is probably NBA Elite 11. But a basketball game. This one's got an interesting story behind it.
You see, dear viewer, NBA Elite 11 was cancelled. Kind of. This game was planned to be a reboot of the NBA Live series, but after putting out a demo for the game that was very broken, EA realized this game just wasn't it and just cancelled it outright. Kind of. You see, copies of the game did end up shipping to retailers, and while most retailers sent the copies back, some copies were sold to consumers.
And if you want a game that actually released, fucking Aquanauts Holiday. Next up for the PS Vita, the rarest game on there is The Binding of Isaac Rebirth. I guess that was before indie games, were produced as physical games, you know what I mean? So this was kind of rare to come by, but we already know Binding of Isaac, so I don't need to talk about that, but it's clear that I own it. Moving on to the PS4, we got a game, and want to know what it's called? You're not going to believe me. Poop Slinger. Nah, I'm serious.
So you might think that this is a bit of a joke, but that's because it technically is. You see, Poop Slinger was announced by one guy on Twitter who ripped off the Limited Run Games logo on a website that, yeah, definitely looked legit. On top of that, the pre-orders went up on April Fool's Day. Many people thought it was a joke and didn't bother, but some people pre-ordered it. And they got it. Only like 84 copies were actually sold, and who knows what happened to all the other unsold copies.
But, is it good? I mean, I don't know about you, but it certainly strikes me as a game worth $20K. That's all for PlayStation. I feel like it's too early for the PS5 because most, if not all, there could be some that I don't know about, but most of those games are still on the market, so they haven't really gone up in value yet. But real quick, let's look at some Xbox games.
Starting with the original Xbox, there are two that normally pop up. One of which being Futurama the video game, going for a measly $300.
I mean, I know that is expensive, you know, that's definitely more than I would pay normally for a game, but come on, that's nothing compared to what we've seen. And I have a $1 million bill!
But Futurama is not the rarest Xbox game, as that honor goes to Steel Battalion. A game when bundled with a big-ass controller costs $3,000, but by itself, a measly $400.
Now, as for the Xbox 360, NBA Elite 11 makes a return because that was going to be multi-platform. But other than that, the rarest game on there is Marvel Ultimate Alliance Gold for $200. And lastly, Xbox One. Not doing it Series X because, you know, same reason as the PS5. But also Xbox One is kind of similar to that, where it's still on the market. At least the PS4 had a game like Poop Slinger. But the rarest game for the Xbox One is Naruto Shippuden Ultimate Ninja Storm Legacy for $275. To be fair, you ask many game collectors what the punchline for video game collecting is, most of them will probably tell you Xbox. Not saying that's how it should be, just saying that's how it is. We're almost done here, but there is one more major player in the history of video game consoles that I'd feel remiss if I didn't mention: Atari.
Starting off with the 2600, there are three games in particular I want to mention. The most infamous probably being Pepsi Invaders.
I think I want Coke.
Nah, but this, you'll never believe it, is an altered version of Space Invaders.
What?
But the real catch, though, is this game was actually commissioned by Coca-Cola themselves. Because you're shooting Pepsi as Coke. You're destroying Pepsi. So, Coke made this game, not Pepsi.
I think I want Pepsi.
Come on, let's go. Come, let's go, do this!
Yeah, let's go! Crack me open a Coke! Wait, I don't even like soda.
So there are only 125 cartridges of Pepsi Invaders, definitely making it one of the rarest games on the Atari 2600, but Air Raid would like to say something.
Air Raid, what is it that you would like to say?
Only 13 copies of me exist. And also DPX, you're a liar, because you don't own any of me.
Alright, that's great, Air Raid. Thanks for coming. Why do you sound familiar? But believe it or not, Air Raid is still not the rarest game for the Atari 2600, as I now take you over to Red Sea Crossing.
Red Sea Crossing for the Atari 2600 was only available through mail order, and even though apparently only 100 copies were produced, only 2 have been found.
And I own one of them.
DPX, shut up, you don't own Red Sea Crossing.
What? I can't hear you. Anyways, I'm just going to rapid fire through some other consoles, like I'm going to do the rest of Atari's consoles, and then after that, we're just going to rapid fire through some other video game consoles throughout history.
For Atari 5200, Bounty Bob Strikes Back. Looks like Bounty Bob has quite the bounty on him. Atari 7800, Tank Command. Definitely didn't tank in value. Atari Lynx, a game called Zaku. Jaguar, Battlesphere, or Atari carts, depending on what day it is.
Alright, now for some miscellaneous.
TurboGrafx 16, Magical Chase. TurboGrafx 16 CD, Sid Mead's Terraforming. Neo Geo, Neo Turf Masters. Neo Geo Pocket Color, Facile, or whatever the fuck that says. Commodore 64, Hard and Heavy.
I know that's right.
Intellivision, Spiker Super Pro Volleyball. ColecoVision, Nether Dungeon. Amiga, Castlevania. 3DO, Lucian's Quest. For the VIC-20, Ultima Escape from Mount Drash. Bandai WonderSwan Hanafuda Shiyoyo. Bandai WonderSwan Color. Judgment Silver Sword. Nokia N-Gage Sega Rally Championship. Gizmondo Point of Destruction. Gamecom Wheel of Fortune 2. Tiger R-Zone Mortal Kombat Trilogy. Hyperscan Interstellar Wrestling League. Apple Pippin Super Marathon. Action Max Blue Thunder. Philips CDI.
That's where I draw the line. So I showed you the rarest games of all time, and I own every single one of them. I'm rich.
DPX.
Holy shit! Gazpacho?
I'm back.
Wait, didn't you get blown up by the bomb last year? I thought you died.
Dude, I literally showed up earlier this year. Did you, like, forget?
Huh. So what brings you here today?
Cut the bullshit, DPX. I know you're lying. We all know you're lying.
What?
DPX, bucko, you are a fraud.
Explain.
You bullshitted everyone. You pretend to own all these rare games, but you don't own a single one of them.
What? I take issue with such allegations.
Oh. I can prove it.
Go ahead.
Nintendo World Championship. You didn't play that. You don't own it. You just played Super Mario Bros., Rad Racer, and Tetris separately. Hell, for Super Mario Bros., you didn't even collect 50 coins, and you thought none of us would notice. You probably got some comments about that already. You did a similar thing with Campus Challenge. You just played 3 separate games, and showed a second of each of them. For Tetris on Sega Genesis, you never mentioned that the game was actually officially released on the Sega Genesis Mini. You even left it in widescreen, you fucking wormball. You want some more? Poop Slinger. Sure, the game might be $20,000 on eBay, but you never mentioned that that game costs $5 on the PS Store. Admit it, DPX, you don't own any of these games, at least not in their rarest forms. Hell, some of them you didn't even play, you just talked about them.
Alright, fine, you caught me. I don't physically own any of these games, at least not in their rarest forms, except for Final Fantasy Pixel Remasters. This one I got for real. I'm still pretty happy about this one. But other than that, fine, yeah, I bullshitted. What do you want from me? What are you gonna do?
Oh, you seem to have forgotten what I put you through last year. But don't worry, because this year, I sure got something spooky for you.
What exactly did you have in mind? You're not gonna tell me, are you?